So welcome, Giles.
Hi, Jamie. Thanks for having me on.
And Giles, the place I love to start these conversations is to ask, what first sparked your interest in these principles?
I kind of stumbled across them, but when I look back, it almost seems like there was a sort of an inevitability to my path ending up at coming across at that stumbling upon, because I never really knew what I wanted to do with my life, much to my parents' chagrin, and so I'd get really enthused by something and throw myself into it wholeheartedly, and then kind of like feel like I've wrung it dry and want to move on to something different. And for years, I've really beat myself up about that, and thought there was something wrong with me. And so I became fascinated with what made people change and how people worked. And I mean, I went to medical school and took a year out and did a psychology degree because I was really interested in it. And then I left medicine. And after I'd left medicine, which you're not really supposed to be able to do, and come out the other side of it doing something else that you really like, it really got me thinking, hang on a minute, what's going on here? How does change work? So I went through your kind of like your fairly classic personal development odyssey and everything. And then it was only it was a couple of years ago when I started working one-on-one with people, initially thinking that it was going to be all about career change. And I was looking for my way of doing things. So I was scouring the podcast directory for examples of coaching, stumbled across your podcast, listened to an episode on career change where you didn't mention career change once.
Oh, typical me.
Thought, hang on, what's going on here? This is a bit odd, but obviously really struck a chord, because it just kind of it really resonated with all the experiences that the way that I'd experienced career change myself. And then just started getting deeper into it, reading around it and stuff, and then had an experience of my own health, I think is the best way to put it. When I was speaking at a conference that I'd spoken at many times before for the last decade, in fact, given the same talk that I always gave about career change, sort of Giles's view of how life works. And I've been looking in this direction, and I'd had some insights. And up there on stage in front of an audience of like 90 people who'd come to see me talk about that, I found myself just literally tearing up the script, just stood there, opened my mouth and said, oh, I'm not going to tell you about what I'm supposed to be telling you about, because I've got something really important for you to hear, and kind of like delivered my first principles-based talk right there and then. Oh, it was, and even though, like if you told me I was going to do that in advance, I'd have run a mile. That was totally not me. I was very much a PowerPoint kind of guy. And in spite of all of that, I felt more okay and safe and just fully in the flow of life, and just felt absolutely great. And I knew that life would never be the same afterwards, because I knew that nothing could touch me.
That's such a great story, Giles. And I love that you didn't even plan it, like that you walked out with your script and then something occurred to you. You described that as you had an experience of your health. Yeah. Let me ask you this, Giles. You just said something very, very interesting. You said, I knew life was never going to be the same. How did you know? Like, what let you know?
Well, because I was in this really extreme circumstance. I was, like I said, if you told me in advance that I was going to do that, on paper, that's a terrible thing. That's a terrible thing to go through, to go to a conference, tell everyone right there and then in the moment that you're not going to talk to them about what you were supposed to be talking to them about. That's absolutely, and so it was seeing that, that you know, in spite of my physiology in that moment, you know, my heart was absolutely hammering in my ears, and yet inside, there was just this beautiful calm. It felt like I was being carried through that hour that I spoke to them, and it just disconnected circumstance from feelings, and I knew that, well, whatever I'm up against now, I know it can't hurt me, and I know it's okay to feel those feelings.
For someone who's watching it and they're like, hang on a second, I think I missed a meeting because you were listening to some podcasts, you were going about your business, doing your talks, and then one day you're speaking at a conference that you were scheduled to speak at, and you rip up your script and tell them something else indeed. Instead, where did that come from? How do you, for someone who's like, catch me up on this one, how do you make sense of that, Giles? Like, what happened that led to that?
Well, I had this particular conference I speak at. I get to deliver the same talk 2 days running.
Right.
And on the previous day, so I'd been reading around the principles, and I'd had a ton of kind of like of little insights, and it's like, oh, that makes total sense. Oh yeah. So I had all of this kind of almost like new material, a new take on my old material.
Right.
And on the Friday, in fact, I was so relaxed about my talk that I missed the beginning of it.
Right.
I got the time wrong in my head, and one of the AV technicians phoned me. He goes, "You do realise you're on like now this minute, don't you?" So, and I went up, and so much had happened to me in the run up to that I'd not really had time to kind of sit down with my material and try and figure out, you know, how I was gonna do things differently. So I was desperately trying to kind of like meld all of my new understanding with my old material, and I was so up in my head. It was like I could tell. It was like I could hear my own voice going, "Well, you're screwing this up good and proper, Giles." And oh, look at the faces there. And then I saw somebody looking down at their phone, and I thought, like right near the front, and I just thought, oh no, people are just browsing the internet during this talk. This is absolutely terrible. I never want to do this again. And so the next day, there was just this, I don't want to go through that experience again. And the only way out of having that experience again was to completely leave behind all of the old stuff.
Oh, so that's interesting. So it's almost like it was kind of in the post the previous day. It's like it sounds like, don't let me put my words in your mouth, but it sounds like something which had actually fit very well the previous year. Yeah. When you rocked up to do something similar, it didn't really fit anymore. And by the second day, the new thing came through.
Yeah. And I mean, you know, it was still about career change. The talk was, you know, like overall, it was all, but it was like it was so amazingly contextual. It was just like the words that were coming out of my mouth seemed to be exactly what they needed to hear. And, you know, I offered people to sign up to my mailing list afterwards. And on the Friday, I think maybe 5 people signed up to my mailing list. And on the Saturday, it was 75 people signed up to my mailing list. That was the difference in the 2 talks.
Yeah. And do you think that that's a function of both congruity in terms of you're lined up on all channels, but also the impact of what you were sharing with people?
Yeah, because I mean, I was being brutally honest with them. I mean, it seemed a little bit rude to not give them the talk that that they thought they were coming for. So I felt that that needed a little bit of explanation. So I was kind of sort of almost observing what was going on at the time it was going on. So they were very involved in the talk that second day. So yeah, but it was definitely things aligning and just being so just being so present to the audience, you know, you could just feel it in the room, that you could have heard a pin drop a lot of the time, and you know, everyone was kind of like leaning forwards on the edge of their seats and stuff. It was beautiful. It was my birthday as well. It was like the best birthday present ever.
Nice. Yeah. New career. Brilliant. And what have been some of your insights, discoveries, realizations since then that have made a difference to you, both in your life, but also in sharing this understanding with people?
Well, it goes on and on, doesn't it? All the time, you know. I just that idea of experiencing health. I was at the Three Principles conference at last weekend, and I heard Christine Heath speaking, and I heard her say, to experience your own health is the most powerful thing that can happen to you. And for some reason, that just absolutely really landed for me. And it's like, yes. And the story I've just told you, I saw in a completely different light all over again. And it had me scurrying off for like the World Health Organization definition of health. And it's right there. It's right there. They say it's not just the absence of symptoms or conditions. It's a total state of physical, mental, and social well-being. And yet, certainly in my career as a practicing clinician and a surgeon, you know, we spent it looking for disease. We spent it looking for illness and correcting that. And so now I just, you know, I see health in a completely different way.
Well, speaking to you as a doctor and a physician, I can imagine that a lot of people who are watching this are like, well, actually, I could do with more physical health, whether it's to do with strength and kind of immune system, or whether it's to do with exercising more or eating better, or just taking better care of themselves, as well as the psychological side of it, and being more comfortable in their own skin and free from addictions and all that sort of stuff. I know that you more and more are putting your attention on like looking at helping people to kind of uncover and rediscover that health that's already there, or to use Christine's word, to have an experience of the health that they already have. How do you see that now, and how are you working with people around that?
Well, it's like, I mean, the key is that it's always there. It's a constant, and I don't think we appreciate that. And if it's a constant, well, then what is it that gets in the way of it? You know, why don't we experience our actual health more often? And I mean, I've come to see through you know, appreciating the principles that the cause, that, you know, what lies upstream of so many conditions, whether they're psychological or physical, is chronic mental stress. Yeah. It's, you know, it's I mean, back when I was a medical student, I had to do a literature, the first ever literature review project I did as a student. I did on I get eczema from time to time. And I knew that whenever I was really stressed around exam time, my eczema would flare up. It was as plain as my nose to me that there was a link there between how stressed I was feeling and the condition of my skin. But and this was like early 90s, when I did the literature review back then, it felt a little bit sort of subversive, and I was a little bit worried I might get kicked out of medical school, because it wasn't really accepted at all back then. Whereas now, you know, the connection between essentially an overactive fight or flight response, you know, if our bodies are in fight or flight all the time, there's a whole ton of metabolic, you know, and psychological aspects that lie downstream of that. And we are laboring under the misapprehension that there's just not much we can do about that there's not much we can do about stress, because life's pretty stressful, isn't it?
Well, and that raises kind of my next question. I can imagine people who are watching and listening going, well, hang on, Giles. I mean, I know you may have an idyllic life wandering in the Welsh countryside, but I've got, 500 emails to reply to, and I've got my boss and my mortgage and my, my kids and all this stuff. While I understand that my stressful life is disconnecting me from my inner health, what am I going to do about that?
Well, it's a cause and effect thing. It's a cause and effect thing. So we're laboring under the impression that the symptoms are what we see, and that the cause is the stress. Where the reality that I've come to appreciate is that the stress itself is a symptom. And the stress is a symptom of a misunderstanding about how we're experiencing the world. And that the stress doesn't come from the things that are happening to us. The stress comes from the thinking that we have about the things that look stressful to us. And it just turns out that correcting that simple, innocent misunderstanding means an end to stress, because we see it for what it is, that it's a thought created thing that isn't coming from the situation. Just like me stood up there on stage, super stressful experience, and yet I didn't experience stress at all in that moment. And it was making that connection, really, or that disconnection, as it were.
And for someone who's listening, Giles, and who goes, okay, so I need to change my thinking. How do you, because I know you work with all kinds of people to help them genuinely reconnect with that inner source of health and well-being. What kind of direction do you point people?
Well, it's to really see insightfully that we've already got it all going on for us. We've already got everything that we need to bring us back into balance. The human body is an absolutely amazing thing. And, right now in our bodies, there are so many processes going on. And we're totally unaware of all of them, and we're not in control of any of them. If I switch this light on here on my eye, my pupil will constrict, and I don't need to think about that. I don't need to get my fingers in the machinery and do anything about it. It will just happen. And then when I take the light away, my pupil will dilate again. And it's the same with every single organ system in our bodies, are always striving to bring us back into balance. And our psychology is no different. It's if we leave it alone and stop trying to fix our thinking, then it fixes itself. You go to bed with a problem, you get up the next morning and you see it in a completely different light, and it's no longer a problem. And, I've got a small child who lives in the house with me, and she's the perfect demonstration of the huge mood swings. She's 6 years old and she has some cracking tantrums, and they pass. She's not trying to change her thinking. She's just not making a whole load of meaning out of it that us clever grown-ups who know better.
So is that kind of your starting point with people, to just point them to the fact that actually there's already a self-correcting system at play, or do you take it further than that?
Yeah, well, yeah. I think the fact that, as far as I can see, this is just the way that we work, means that anybody I work with has got a lifetime's experience of having witnessed this for themselves, but not really taken much notice of it.
Yeah.
They've not really just been pointed to the significance of the fact that, one day you'll see something in a particular way, and then the next day, when you're in a different mood entirely, it will look completely different. They've not been pointed to the significance of that. And it really doesn't take much for people to, as soon as they start looking towards that, it's just like, because this seems to be how we're built, that the bits of the jigsaw fall into place for them.
Yeah. Yeah, beautiful. And the thing that was occurring to me, because obviously you're now sharing this understanding and
Mm.
working with people with this understanding pretty much exclusively, I think.
Yeah.
How is this different from how you were working before? Like, what's your experience of this like compared to how you were working before?
Uh, it's uh, it's a lot more fun. I
Yeah,
mean, it's fun, isn't it?
yeah, it really is.
It's just like being human with people, and letting them see for themselves that being human is okay, and it's actually pretty cool. And so, so there's no drugs. I don't prescribe medicines for anything. If I leave that to their GP, or if they're under specialist care or anything. And there are no I don't prescribe any practices or anything,
Mm.
because I mean, for years, another thing I used to beat myself up about was that I I I sensed that being present and being focused was a very, very good thing, and that's when the good things happened.
Yeah,
But I didn't know how to get there.
yeah.
And so many people had said to me, well, obviously meditation is the way. And the number of times I tried meditation and just couldn't get on with it. And it was another thing to add to my list of things that are wrong with Giles.
Yeah.
And
Or meditator.
yeah. And so when I saw this, again, it was just a huge relief, It's like, oh, to experience well-being, there's there's nothing I have to do, just something to see. And I mean, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. So it's incredibly rewarding work. It really is.
That's great to hear. What are some of the results you're seeing with your clients and patients and the people you're working with?
Yeah, I've had some really nice. I've worked with some doctors who've been burnt out. It's a fairly common thing, and seen some real transformations there, where when the kind of like the penny drops for them, and clinicians who were actually thinking of leaving medicine, or changing specialty, because they were I worked with a registrar who was in a very busy teaching hospital in an acute specialty, and she was thinking of leaving, and now she's this pillar of the department, and she's like their well-being champion, and she's sharing with other people. And that's what I love about it, is that as soon as somebody sees something, they're like almost compelled to share with other people. And so there's this wonderful ripple effect. We did a series of workshops in this department, in the pediatric department.
Oh, that was with the
and it was great, because the whole department, from what my registrar colleague has told me since, has just become a much lighter place to work. It's still the same difficult teaching hospital with the difficult patients and everything, but the atmosphere in the unit is improved as a result.
Well, the thing that's striking me literally as I listened to you, I had a conversation with our mutual friend and colleague Louisa Dale yesterday, and she was talking about the ripple effect that it's having in the NHS trust she works in. And the thing that suddenly struck me, there's a huge advantage when the people that you're working with are themselves healers, healing professionals, health workers, and that sort of thing, especially when they're in these, busy, so-called pressurized environments, because they'll instantly, once they see it, they'll see the advantages of it to others. And they're in a context where they're going to be, I would imagine, very keen to share the love as quickly as possible.
Yeah. I mean, with colleagues and with patients. I mean, this is the thing. It's like once you've seen something, it's not that you're kind of like trying to do things differently. You've just got such a different perspective on health. You've got, that health is inside every single person, 24/7, it doesn't go anywhere. Well, that's just going to change every conversation you have with your colleagues and your patients.
It's so interesting, Giles. I was talking to someone recently and they said, well, how will I apply this? And I was kind of like, well, once you see it, you can't really stop yourself from it. Like, it's going to inform what you're doing, like you just described, but also like you described in that very first talk where you started sharing it. Like, once you had the eyeball for it, it starts coming out. I was talking with, well, funny story. One of my clarity coaches is an assistant head teacher called Terry Broughton. And she came on the first module of the certification training. And she had retired as a head teacher, but was doing basically training and development with school leadership teams. So she came on the first module of the training, and she had decided by the end of the first weekend that it wasn't for her, that she was going to give me a call after the weekend and pull out of it and that sort of thing. But she had a workshop scheduled that she was due to deliver on the Monday after it. So she was like, okay, I'll go and deliver this workshop. Then I'll call Jamie and tell him I didn't understand any of it. I thought it was not for me, and I'll tell him I'm playing it. She goes and delivers the workshop, and she called me up that night. She told me the story. She said, I was going to pull out of the program. I delivered this workshop today, and I did it completely differently to how I've ever done it. I felt so much connection with the people. I loved my work in a way that I hadn't loved it so much before. How the hell did that happen? And that's what I hear in both things you described, that you see something and then you see it in everyone, and it informs what you're doing. So it sounds to me like I think you said just before we got on the call that you've had further insights into this just in the last couple of weeks when you were at the conference and that sort of thing. What are you seeing going forward with this understanding and with this work in your practice and what you're up to, Giles?
Yeah, I mean, I see the principles as the future of medicine. I really do. It's like there's so much there's so much physical and psychological morbidity that lies downstream of this simple misunderstanding.
Yeah,
it's just the potential is, and you can see we're prescribing more and more and more drugs and more antidepressants, and it's so far downstream. It's just tackling symptoms, if that, and we're not looking at the root. We're not looking at the root cause, and the root cause is this is misunderstanding where our experience comes from.
Well, Giles, you've heard me say more than once that I see these principles as the future of psychology. It's the first time I've ever heard anyone say that these principles are the future of medicine. And yet, as soon as you said it, I was like, yeah, I totally get that. And I think for someone who's watching or listening, they may be thinking, well, hang on a second, when are Jamie and Giles going to talk about principles in physical health? But what I hear and what you're saying is that so much of even the physical challenges that people have, whether it's to do with heart disease or hypertension or those are the same thing. Those are the same thing, aren't they? Or dietary issues or weight issues or all these. So many of things are either directly downstream from this misunderstanding we're talking about, or at the very least exacerbated by it. So I'm gonna say something that is gonna sound it may sound like a bridge too far, so feel free to pick me up on it. My assertion is, if you get a deeper understanding of these principles, it's going to start clearing up health things, not necessarily in the order that you might want them to be done in, and not necessarily it's not necessarily going to be one-to-one, like, go on one weekend of training or listen to one recording and then, your dandruff will clear up or whatever. But it looks to me like that there is a direct cause and effect relationship between waking up to the truth of the innate health and well-being that we all have at the heart of our nature, waking up to that and experiencing better health outcomes in your life. Is that too bold, or am I being...
No, it's absolutely spot on, because I mean, if you look at there are so many lifestyle illnesses these days, and when you look at why people, drink too much or take drugs or gamble or eat too much, or most of it's in an attempt to feel better. Most of it's an attempt to feel better, because nobody's told us that we have everything we need already to feel absolutely fine, and that we don't need anything from outside, because that's not the way it works. That, happiness truly is an inside job.
That's so great to hear. Giles, where can people find out more about you and get in touch with you?
I spend a lot of time on Facebook and Twitter. Look me up, Giles P Croft. My website is gilespcroft.com, and there's links to everything there.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for being here, Giles.
Pleasure.